High Admiral Kextol's facial tentacles coiled tightly against his crystalline skull as he studied the massive holographic projection dominating the Galactic Council's emergency chamber. The human vessel's silhouette dwarfed the standard ship markers on the display, its modified profile unlike anything in their extensively documented databases. 3 separate sensor stations had confirmed its trajectory. The ship was heading directly for the Meridian sector's most populated systems. "Impossible," muttered Counselor Vectera, her bioluminescent patterns flashing in distress. The humans assured us they would respect the boundary treaties. The elderly Lumini's light patterns cast shifting shadows across the chamber's pearl-white walls. Kextol activated the neural interface with their defense network. "Deploy the early warning buoys. All civilian vessels are to clear the approaching vessel's trajectory immediately." His commands rippled through the quantum network, causing emergency beacons to flare across a dozen star systems. In the lower observation pit, Junior Analyst Zira 8 frantically compared the vessel's readings against known human warship configurations. Her cybernetic enhancements processed the data streams faster than any organic mind could manage, but something wasn't adding up. The energy signatures were all wrong for a warship. Massive power outputs, yes, but not in the configurations typical of weapon systems. "High Admiral," she started to say, her voice lost in the growing chaos of the chamber as more officials arrived. The Council's emergency protocols were already in motion, evacuation orders being transmitted across 3 star systems in the vessel's path. Ambassador Anxethal, the Council's resident expert on human affairs, slithered onto his hovering platform. "We must establish communication immediately. The human psychological profiles indicate they respond well to direct dialogue, even in hostile situations." His scales shifted color to match the chamber's walls, a sign of extreme anxiety among his species. "Communication." First Speaker Landvox's voice boomed through the chamber. "The last time humans sent a warship of this size into alien space, they called it a peacekeeping mission. 3 star systems had to be quarantined afterward due to the devastation." The ancient Voidborn's ethereal form crackled with barely contained energy. Zira 8 finally managed to access the deep archive records, her optical implants glowing brighter as she processed the information. The ship's profile was similar to a Jupiter-class destroyer, but the modifications were extensive. Where weapon hardpoints should be, she detected what appeared to be massive sealed chambers. The energy signatures matched medical containment fields more than weapon systems. "High Admiral, please. There's something." Her words were cut off by the blaring of proximity alarms. The human vessel had increased speed, though not to attack velocity. Its trajectory would bring it within communication range in less than 30 minutes. Kextol's tentacles whipped through a series of command gestures. "Begin immediate evacuation of the outer colonies. Alert the defense fleet to assume defensive positions at the following coordinates." He paused, noticing Zira 8's increasingly agitated attempts to gain his attention. "What is it, Analyst? Make it quick." Before she could explain her findings, the chamber's main display flared with an incoming transmission. The human vessel was hailing them, using not military frequencies, but medical emergency channels. The chamber fell silent as the massive ship's designation appeared in glowing characters: HMS Nightingale. High Admiral Kextol's tentacles froze mid-command. In all his years of service, he had never seen a human warship transmit on medical frequencies. Perhaps this first contact would be different from the others, if they all survived long enough to find out. The Council chamber's holographic display flickered as the transmission from HMS Nightingale stabilized. Instead of the expected stern-faced military commander, the image revealed a woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical braid. Laugh lines crinkled around her eyes despite her serious expression, and her uniform, while crisp, bore the distinctive blue and white patches of the United Earth Medical Corps. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the HMS Nightingale to Galactic Council Control. We apologize for our unannounced entry into your space, but we detected a Category 1 medical emergency in your sector." Her calm voice carried the weight of authority without a hint of threat. High Admiral Kextal's tentacles relaxed slightly, though his suspicion remained evident. "Captain Chen, you've brought a warship into Council space without authorization. Explain yourself immediately." The camera view widened, revealing the bridge behind Captain Chen. The Council members murmured in surprise. Where they expected to see weapon stations and tactical displays, they instead witnessed a harmonious blend of medical monitoring equipment and spacefaring technology. Most striking was the crew. Humans working alongside various alien species, including several races from the Council space. The Nightingale was indeed a Jupiter-class destroyer, Chen acknowledged, but she's been completely retrofitted as an emergency medical response vessel. Those energy signatures you're detecting. There are containment fields and mobile surgical units. What your sensors read as weapon hardpoints are actually rapid deployment medical pods. 08 stepped forward, her cybernetic implants pulsing with excitement. "High Admiral, this matches my analysis. The power signatures align with Class A medical containment systems, not weapons arrays. And look." She gestured at the data streaming across her personal display. "Those are quantum isolation fields, typically used for preventing the spread of trans-dimensional pathogens." Dr. Landvox's ethereal form drifted closer to the display. "Why would humans convert a warship for medical purposes? Surely purpose-built medical vessels would be more efficient." Captain Chen's expression grew grim. "Military vessels are built to survive battlefield conditions. Their power plants can handle massive energy requirements, their hulls can maintain containment even under stress, and their life support systems are designed for worst-case scenarios. When facing a pandemic that can cross species barriers, we learned the hard way that ordinary medical ships just don't cut it." She touched a control, and the display split to show a massive internal chamber. Rows of specialized medical pods lined the walls, each capable of adapting its environment to sustain any known sentient species. Where missile magazines once stood, research laboratories now hummed with activity. "We detected a quantum anomaly in your sector that matches the signature of the Cassandra plague we encountered in the Orion Arm last year. If we're right, you have less than 72 hours before the first cases appear." Chen's voice carried the weight of experience. "We can help, but we need your cooperation and trust." Ambassador Engsthel's scales shifted to a deep blue of contemplation. The Orion Arm incident, wasn't that contained within weeks? Most quantum-based contagions take months to neutralize. "Because we had the Nightingale," Chen replied. "She's not just a hospital ship. She's a testament to humanity's determination to repurpose the tools of war into instruments of healing. Every weapon system, every military-grade component has been adapted to save lives instead of taking them." The chamber fell silent as the Council members processed this information. High Admiral Kextal's tentacles moved through a series of contemplative patterns before he spoke. "Show us everything, Captain. If there's truly a threat to our people, we need to understand exactly what we're facing." Captain Chen nodded, relief visible in her features. "Thank you, Admiral. Let me introduce you to our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. James Okonjo. He can explain exactly what we're up against and why time is of the essence." The first reports arrived during Dr. Okonjo's briefing to the Council. On the crystalline plains of New Meridia, a family of silicon-based life forms shattered into dust while crossing the market square. Within hours, similar cases appeared across 3 different districts. The crystal beings' natural resonance frequencies were somehow being disrupted at the quantum level. "Exactly as we feared," Dr. Okonjo said, his dark fingers dancing across the holographic controls. The Nightingale's massive medical database projected a simulation of the infection's spread pattern. The quantum plague doesn't care about biological barriers. It attacks the fundamental forces that hold sentient life together. 08's cybernetic sensors detected elevated stress patterns among the Council members as more emergency signals flooded the communications network. On Void's edge, the energy-based Lumini reported their youngest members flickering out of existence. The space-faring drift colonies encountered entire sectors of quantum instability. Our standard quarantine protocols are failing, High Admiral Kextal announced, his tentacles writhing in agitation. The infection is somehow bypassing our containment fields. Captain Chen stepped forward, her voice steady despite the chaos. Because it's not spreading through normal space. Medical pod teams, deploy to all affected sectors. Execute Protocol Quantum Shield. The Nightingale's hull hummed as dozens of modified torpedo tubes rotated into position. The council chamber erupted in alarm, but before anyone could protest, the tubes launched. Instead of weapons, sleek medical pods shot forth, their trajectories carrying them to precise coordinates above each affected colony. The pod's outer shells split open like metallic flowers, revealing sophisticated medical equipment and containment fields. Those are military-grade quantum dampeners, 08 observed, her cybernetic eyes tracking the deployment pattern. But they've been modified to create medical containment zones instead of weapon effects. Dr. Okonjo nodded approvingly. The same technology that once disrupted quantum targeting systems now helps us isolate and treat quantum-based infections. Each pod creates a localized field that can stabilize affected individuals long enough for treatment. On the main display, footage from New Meridia showed the medical pods in action. A crystalline child, their structure already showing signs of degradation, was quickly enveloped in a precisely calibrated quantum field. The deterioration stopped almost instantly. "It's working," Ambassador Anxithel reported, his scales shifting to hopeful green. "But these are just containment measures. How do we stop the spread?" Captain Chen's expression remained focused as she studied the incoming data. "The pods are buying us time, but you're right. We need to find the source." She turned to Dr. Okonjo. "Show them what the deep scans revealed." The holographic display shifted to show a complex network of quantum filaments spreading through subspace. Where they intersected, new cases of the plague appeared. The pattern was too precise to be natural. "This is engineered," Dr. Okonjo confirmed grimly. "Someone or something is using quantum entanglement to spread this plague deliberately. The good news is the Nightingale sensors can track it. The bad news," he paused, looking at the spreading pattern. "The source is coming from somewhere in restricted space, the region your people sealed off centuries ago." High Admiral Kextal's tentacles went rigid. "The Forbidden Zone? That's impossible. Nothing could survive there after the ancient collapse." "Clearly something did," Captain Chen said quietly. "And it's been waiting a very long time to make its move. Admiral, we need everything you know about what happened in that sector. The Nightingale might be the only ship equipped to handle both the medical crisis and whatever we find in there." The Nightingale's main medical bay hummed with activity as Dr. Okonjo led the council delegation through rows of advanced treatment pods. Where gun batteries once lined the walls, banks of quantum stabilizers now maintained precise environmental conditions for dozens of different species. The ship's military-grade power core thrummed beneath their feet, channeling enormous energy into the medical systems. "Your adaptation of martial technology is surprisingly elegant," 08 observed, her cybernetic sensors analyzing each system they passed. The former targeting computers now ran complex molecular simulations, while modified shield generators created sterile fields around critical patients. "Humans have always been good at turning swords into plowshares," Dr. Okonjo replied, leading them to the central diagnostic chamber. "Though I admit, this particular conversion was born of desperation during the Orion crisis." High Admiral Kextal's tentacles curled with interest. "The infamous incident that led to the creation of these medical vessels. We heard only rumors." The doctor's expression grew somber as he activated the main display. 3 years ago, we encountered a quantum-based weapon that became something worse, a plague that could think. It adapted to every countermeasure, crossed species barriers, and nearly wiped out 2 sectors. He paused, looking at the readouts from the current crisis. "What we're seeing here is too similar to be coincidence." Captain Chen joined them, her uniform showing signs of fatigue after hours of coordinating emergency responses. Show them the pattern analysis, James. They need to understand what we're really fighting. The display lit up with a complex web of quantum signatures. Dr. Okonjo highlighted specific nodes where the infection rates spiked. See these convergence points. They're not random. The plague is following the exact same evolutionary pattern we saw in Orion. But that's impossible unless it's the same weapon. 08 finished, her optical implants flashing as she processed the data. But the Orion strain was contained. Your records show it was completely neutralized. That's what we thought. Captain Chen's voice was grim. Until we detected its signature here, coming from your forbidden zone. A sector that, according to your records, was sealed off after some kind of catastrophic event involving quantum technology. High Admiral Kextal's tentacles writhed in clear distress. The ancient collapse. Our ancestors sealed that sector when their quantum experiments went wrong. All records were purged to prevent anyone from repeating their mistakes. Dr. Okonjo shared a meaningful look with his captain before turning back to the council members. Not all records, I hope, because what we're seeing suggests those ancient experiments didn't just fail. They created something that's been waiting all this time to get out. The quarantine pods are showing interesting readings. 08 interjected, interfacing directly with the ship's systems. The quantum signatures of infected patients, they're not just breaking down, they're being rewritten. As if something is trying to change them into something else. Captain Chen stepped forward, her expression resolute. This is why the Nightingale was created. We took the most powerful warship we had and turned it into something that could fight an enemy no conventional weapon could touch. Now we need your help. Whatever's in the Forbidden Zone, whatever your ancestors were trying to create or contain, it's awake. And it's learned from every encounter, every quarantine, every species it's ever encountered. Including humans. Admiral Kextal asked quietly. Especially humans, Dr. Okonjo confirmed, which is exactly why we might be the key to stopping it. Our history of warfare gave us something unique, the ability to think like an enemy that's always adapting. We just need to understand what we're really fighting. The converted ammunition bay of the Nightingale now served as the ship's primary research laboratory, its reinforced walls containing equipment that would have been deemed too dangerous on a conventional medical vessel. Captain Chen stood at the observation window, watching her crew work alongside council scientists in an urgent race against time. 3 more colonies have reported outbreaks, 08 announced, her cybernetic systems directly interfacing with the ship's quantum communications array. But the pattern is changing. It's becoming more deliberate. Dr. Okonjo hunched over a quantum microscope, its display showing the bizarre behavior of an infected crystal fragment from New Meridia. The plague isn't just breaking down matter anymore. Look at this structural reorganization. It's as if. He straightened suddenly, his eyes wide. Captain, we've been thinking about this all wrong. Show me, Chen ordered, moving to his station. The display revealed crystalline structures that seemed to dance between states of matter, neither fully solid nor energy. It's not destroying the infected beings, Dr. Okonjo explained, his voice tight with urgency. It's trying to change them into something else, something that can exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. High Admiral Kextal's tentacles rippled with alarm. Like the ancient ones were attempting in their final experiments, they sought to transcend the barriers between normal space and quantum reality. The laboratory's main screen flared to life as new data poured in. The Nightingale's powerful sensors, originally designed to detect cloaked enemy vessels, had been repurposed to scan quantum fluctuations. They revealed a chilling pattern, waves of quantum distortion emanating from the Forbidden Zone, each perfectly timed to the outbreak of new cases. It's coordinated, 08 realized, her optical sensors pulsing rapidly. The plague isn't just spreading. It's being directed. The quantum signatures match exactly with the ancient records of the final experiment. Captain Chen's expression hardened as pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The ancient ones didn't just fail in their experiment. They succeeded, but not in the way they intended. Instead of ascending to a higher state of being, they became something else, Dr. Okonjo finished. Something that could exist in quantum space, manipulating reality at its most fundamental level. And now they're trying to convert everything else to their state of existence. The Nightingale's power core hummed louder as it channeled more energy to the containment fields. In the treatment pods throughout the ship, infected patients fluctuated between states of matter, their very atoms struggling against the transformation. The good news, Dr. Okonjo continued, is that we can fight this. The Nightingale's quantum field generators were originally designed to stabilize space around the ship during faster-than-light combat maneuvers. If we modify them to create a cascading field effect, we could prevent the plague from manipulating quantum states within the field. Chen nodded. But the power requirements would be enormous. We'd have to channel everything the ship has, including life support reserves. 08's calculations flashed across her neural display. The Nightingale's military-grade reactor might be strong enough. No civilian vessel could generate the necessary power without destroying itself. That's why they chose this sector, High Admiral Kextall said quietly. Our normal medical ships and quarantine procedures never stood a chance. They were waiting for the right moment, when we'd be defenseless against their transformation. Captain Chen turned to face the viewport, watching her crew race against time. They didn't count on humanity's tendency to repurpose our most powerful weapons into tools of healing. Dr. Okonjo, begin the modifications. We're about to show them that evolution can work both ways. The Nightingale's engineering deck thrummed with barely contained power as Chief Engineer Maya Rodriguez coordinated the massive undertaking of redirecting the ship's military-grade reactor output. Streams of plasma energy, once used to power the vessel's weapon systems, now coursed through hastily modified conduits toward the quantum field generators. Power conversion at 87%, Rodriguez reported, her hands dancing across multiple holographic controls. Any higher, and we risk overloading the original combat shielding circuits. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the environmental controls working at maximum capacity. Captain Chen watched the power readings climb on the main display. We need at least 95% to generate a field strong enough to disrupt the quantum plague's transmission vector. Options. 08 interfaced directly with the ship's systems, her cybernetic enhancements processing the data streams at incredible speed. The auxiliary combat power reserves, the ones designed for emergency weapons deployment. If we reroute them through the medical containment grid first, it could work, Rodriguez interrupted, already making the calculations. The medical grid's regulators could handle the power surge better than the direct circuits, but we'd only get one shot at this. Once those reserves are drained, it'll take hours to regenerate enough power for a second attempt. Dr. Okonjo's voice came through the comm system from the medical bay. Whatever we're going to do, it needs to be soon. I'm seeing quantum fluctuations increasing in all infected patients. The Ancient Ones are accelerating their transformation protocol. High Admiral Kextall's tentacles waved in agitation as he studied the sensor readings. The quantum distortions from the Forbidden Zone are intensifying. They know what we're attempting. The deck plates vibrated as Rodriguez began the power redistribution. Throughout the massive ship, systems that once powered some of humanity's most formidable weapons now channeled their energy into a desperate attempt to save lives. Look at this, 08 suddenly called out, her optical sensors focused on a new data stream. The plague's quantum signature. It's not just similar to the Orion strain. It's evolving faster, learning from each failed transformation attempt. The Ancient Ones are adapting their protocol based on the resistance they encounter. Captain Chen moved to the main engineering console, her expression grim but determined. They're not the only ones who can adapt. Humanity spent centuries developing weapons, but we learned something more important along the way: how to turn those same technologies toward healing. The ship's reactor core pulsed with brilliant energy as Rodriguez made the final adjustments. Power conversion at 92% and climbing. Quantum field generators spooling up. Through the engineering deck's viewport, they could see the space around the Nightingale beginning to shimmer as the quantum field took shape. The massive vessel, once built to destroy, now stood as a beacon of hope for billions of lives across the sector. 94%. Rodriguez called out, her voice tense. Warning indicators flashed across her console as systems approached their limits. The auxiliary combat reserves are ready to deploy on your mark. Captain Chen looked at High Admiral Kextel, who nodded gravely. The time for hesitation had passed. Around them, the Nightingale's hull creaked under the strain of containing such enormous power. Power that had once been meant for destruction, but would now be used for salvation. "Do it," Chen ordered, her voice steady despite the stakes. "Show them that humanity's greatest strength isn't our capacity for warfare. It's our ability to learn from it, to take the tools of conflict and reshape them into instruments of peace." The Nightingale's quantum field burst outward like a silent nova, rippling through space in expanding waves of iridescent energy. On the bridge, status displays showed the massive power drain as every system aboard the converted warship poured its energy into this one desperate gambit. "Quantum field stable at initial deployment," Rodriguez reported from engineering, her voice tense. "Beginning second phase expansion. Auxiliary combat reserves engaging. Now." The ship shuddered as the stored combat power surged through the modified medical systems. Where once that energy would have powered devastating weapons, it now fueled an attempt to save entire civilizations. Captain Chen watched the field strength indicators climb steadily toward the critical threshold. "Field strength at 92%. Zira Ape announced, her cybernetic systems monitoring the quantum interactions. "The plague's transmission vectors are showing signs of disruption." But she paused, optical sensors flaring. "Captain, we're detecting a response from the Forbidden Zone." The main viewer displayed a chilling sight. A mass of quantum distortions was gathering, taking on an almost deliberate shape. The Ancient Ones were making themselves known at last. By the first light, High Admiral Kextal whispered, his tentacles curling in recognition. The historical records were true. They did achieve quantum transcendence. Dr. Okonjo's voice cut through the tension. "The infected patients are responding to the field. The transformation process is slowing, but the Ancient Ones are attempting to compensate. They're trying to force their way through our quantum barrier." Multiple alarms blared as the ship's systems trained under the unprecedented power demands. Primary containment grid showing signs of stress, Rodriguez warned. The medical regulators weren't designed to channel this much combat energy. "Reroute power from life support to the containment grid," Chen ordered. "Leave us just enough to maintain consciousness. Everything else goes to the field." The bridge lighting dimmed as power was diverted. The air grew thin, but nobody complained. They could all see the quantum field's effect spreading through space, creating a barrier between normal space and the twisted quantum realm the Ancient Ones inhabited. "Field strength at 97%, Zira Ape reported, her voice showing strain even through its synthetic edge. "The plague's quantum signature is destabilizing across all infected sectors." Suddenly, the ship lurched violently. The mass of quantum distortions had taken on a more definite form, a writhing collection of geometric shapes that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Ancient Ones were making their final push. "They're attempting to overload our field by concentrating their energy at a single point," Rodriguez called out. "The containment grid can't take this kind of focused pressure." Captain Chen's eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical display. The Ancient One's attack was precise, calculated, using the same military precision that humanity had once relied on. But humanity had learned to think beyond military solutions. "Dr. Okonjo," she called out. "The medical quarantine protocols we used in the Orion crisis, could we modify the field generators to emit that same frequency?" "Yes, but..." Understanding dawned in his voice. "Of course. Fight the infection, not the enemy. Rodriguez, prepare for emergency power redirection on my mark." The Nightingale's hull groaned under the strain as they prepared for their final gambit. They weren't just fighting for survival now. They were fighting to prove that humanity's greatest military achievement wasn't its capacity for destruction, but its ability to adapt and heal. Dr. Okonjo's modified quarantine frequency pulsed through the Nightingale's quantum field, transforming the shimmering barrier into a complex web of medical containment protocols. The Ancient One's geometric forms writhed against the new configuration, their attack faltering as they encountered something entirely unexpected. "It's working," Zira 8 announced, her cybernetic sensors tracking the quantum interactions. "The plague's transformation protocols are being reversed in all infected patients. The Ancient One's attempt to force quantum transcendence is failing." Captain Chen watched the tactical display as the massive entities in the Forbidden Zone began to lose their cohesion. They wanted to recreate their transformation across the sector, to force everyone to join their quantum existence, but they didn't understand what humanity learned from our own history of conflict. "And what was that?" High Admiral Kextal asked, his tentacles moving in curious patterns. "That true advancement cannot be forced," Chen replied, her eyes fixed on the spectacle before them. "Every time we tried to use power to impose change, we failed. It was only when we learned to heal, to help, to transform our weapons into tools of peace that we truly evolved." The ship's enhanced sensors revealed the full scope of their success. Across the sector, infected beings were stabilizing. The crystalline people of New Meridia regained their solid forms. The energy beams of the void colonies stopped flickering and remained stable. Even the quantum distortions from the Forbidden Zone were subsiding. Reading multiple hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, Rodriguez reported from engineering, her voice strained but triumphant. "Power systems are critical, but holding. The medical containment grid is performing perfectly." Dr. Okonjo's voice came through the weakening comm system. "All patients in the medical bay are showing signs of recovery. The quantum plague is being neutralized by their own immune systems, now that the forced transformation has stopped." The Ancient Ones made one final push against the Nightingale's quantum barrier, but where they expected to find military resistance, they encountered something their quantum transcendence hadn't prepared them for: the adaptability of human medical science, born from centuries of learning to heal the wounds of war. "They're retreating," Zira 8 confirmed, watching the geometric forms fade back into the Forbidden Zone. "The quantum signatures are dissipating across all sectors." Captain Chen turned to High Admiral Kextal, her uniform showing the strain of their ordeal. "Admiral, we'll need to establish a permanent medical quarantine field around the Forbidden Zone. The Ancient Ones are still there, but now we know how to contain them, not through force, but through healing." The Admiral's tentacles moved in a formal pattern of respect. "The Galactic Council will have to revise many of its assumptions about humanity. When we saw your warship approaching, we expected conquest. Instead, you showed us salvation." "The Nightingale was built for war," Chen acknowledged, looking around at her exhausted but proud crew. "But humanity's greatest strength isn't our ability to fight. It's our ability to learn from our conflicts, to take the tools of war and transform them into instruments of peace." The ship's power systems slowly stabilized as Rodriguez began emergency repairs. Throughout the vessel, the medical teams continued their work, healing the last victims of the quantum plague. The Nightingale had lived up to her name, not as a harbinger of war, but as a symbol of hope. High Admiral Kextal made his way to the bridge's communication console. "I must inform the Council. They should know that when humanity sends a warship, it might just be the greatest act of peace we could hope for."